Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Doc Ram's with us. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rick. Rick?
I know. I'll wind up. I don't do this. I'm in a bad place. Everywhere I look, it's getting darker and gloomier, including the weather. I have no idea what's going on.
Well, we had a massive storm this morning in our neck of the woods in Missouri.
How does that work? It's so cold here on the West Coast. I mean, it's cold. It's cold.
Yeah. Yep. Well, okay. West Coast. Here's an interesting thing. Salem, Oregon. And this is from Yahoo News. The headline is, Cryptic Emergency Alert Panics Oregon City's Residents. And it shows a store with a shopping cart on its back, shelves cleaned out on one side, and it says Salem, Oregon's emergency alert system blasted.
Send me that link, please. Yeah, please.
I will.
Yeah.
A cryptic alert to cell phones around the capital city, panicking residents, telling them simply, quote, civil emergency, unquote, and, quote, prepare for action, unquote, leaving off the threat that was toxic algae at a local water supply. So what happened is
crazy. Yeah, that's where my daughter lives. She lives up there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a water alert because of the algae in the water and algae bloom.
This is public water.
Yeah.
This is the public water, not wells. Yeah.
And it says officials sent a second message 31 minutes later with more information and a link to the municipal website. Within hours of the first alert, residents stripped the aisles of at least one supermarket in the city's downtown of bottled water, and a shopping cart lay tipped on its side in front of the empty shelves. So it looked like it was a water alert. People didn't know what to do, and the first thing I guess that they do is take
pictures. That's the way it's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so then there was a panic. The integrated public alert warning system inadvertently defaulted to a generic message, and the Emergency Office of Emergency Management apologized for the confusion and the anxiety and the incomplete message. Interesting. How do these people get jobs? I mean, what do you have to do to become one of these inept employees?
You be a human being because you panic with information that's incomplete. And then your imagination starts drawing all kinds of what-ifs. And off you go.
Yep.
And that's the problem. Imagination is reality, which means, you make it so.
Okay, so then that leads to the next question, and this is something I've been unable to figure out. And that is, we talk about preparedness, and, I used to have these meetups in the city of Springfield, and we would teach preparedness, and we would have all kinds of instructors teach classes, including you and Matt Stein, and, just a host of instructors, Norm Shealy, really, really brilliant instructors. And yet, very few people, after 5 years, were seriously prepared. And these are people who are paying attention. These are people who would show up week after week after week. And I don't believe that they are seriously prepared to ride out a calamity.
Well, which one? Which calamity? A pandemic? Earthquake?
Anyone.
There's so many different things potentially available right now. There's no possible way any of us can be totally prepared for it. It's not possible.
Well, if it comes from the air, you're absolutely right. If it's an aerosol delivery, if it's a pathogen delivered via the air, yes. But what I'm saying is, and I've had this chat with Rich Sheban many, many times. He lives off grid. I live off grid. We live on farms. You've been farming. Why is it that people don't move out of the city and say, you know what? I think this is pretty risky staying in the city, but yet they live in these dense population areas where you can't get out. I mean, for New York City, there are only a limited number of bridges. If someone rings the alarm and says, okay, time to go, let's head out toward New Jersey, let's get out of here, let's go to Pennsylvania, how are they going to get out?
If you were to count the amount of bridges between my home and California, just going down 40 miles, it's unbelievable. If we had an earthquake, all of those bridges would be out. If you look at the Trinity Alps down in Northern California, around Eureka, every single mountain has a bridge or two crossing it, and it would mean that every single community is isolated right out of the gate. Out of the gate. No way to cross the river.
Well, I think people need to experience that at least once to see what it's like to be isolated. Now, we live on a farm, and you've been here, and we live on a dirt road. Well, between us and the paved road is a what's called a low water bridge. And a low water bridge is not a bridge. It's just it's concrete across the road with a little dip in it. So water will, when it goes to the lowest point, which is where this low water bridge is, water runs across the road. The road doesn't go over the water. The water runs across the road, and when you drive down this dirt road, you hit this patch of concrete, which has a dip in it, and you drive through the water, and then you continue on more dirt road. Okay, so the idea is they put concrete there because the concrete is more durable than the dirt. The concrete doesn't wash out. So this concrete may be, let's say, 60 feet wide. And the water, let's call it a stream or a creek, is running across this concrete pad. Well, there's a whole bunch of them. And when there's a lot of rain, we cannot leave the farm because the water would be higher. If you opened your truck door on this concrete pad, water will enter your door in your truck. And I'm talking about a 3/4 ton truck, which is, pretty high off the ground. So there are plenty of times when we are trapped here. And it's it's something that you get a little more used to. So if you think that you're going to be trapped at any moment and you don't know when, you prepare for that. So you have food, you have water, you have electricity, you have batteries, you have your, and if you have to make it through that water, well, what you do is you open the truck doors and you let the water run through the truck so that the truck doesn't get washed across the low water bridge and downstream. So, that's what you do. But when you live like this and when you experience the fact that you get trapped in your home at any time, and you have been, you prepare for that. You say, what didn't I like about that? What didn't I like about being trapped? Well, maybe we should have some more food. Maybe we should have some more water. Maybe we should have some jugs of water. Maybe we should have some flashlight batteries. Heck, maybe we ought to be off grid. I see houses that get flooded. And what's the difference between a house that gets flooded and a house that doesn't get flooded? Well, the houses that get flooded are lower and water runs downhill. So those houses are in a potentially bad situation. So why don't we not live downhill, where the water collects? You see all these things and then you make decisions. And you can do what we've done and what Rich Eben has done, and kind of things that you've done, Norm Shealy. You don't build a house at the bottom of the hill. You don't build a house in a flood zone. Because, why would they call it a flood zone? Because it floods. And here in our neck of the woods, you see these signs on the side of the road, and they have numbers on them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it says, that's a sign that says how deep the water is. So it's a sign that's vertical, and when it gets to the number 1, it's 1 foot deep. If it's 2, it's 2 feet deep. If it's 5, it's 5 feet deep. So you don't see, in our neck of the woods, you don't see cars driving into what they think is an inch of water and it's 5 feet deep. Because people can read the signs here. They're more used to it. Whereas if you get on the internet and you look at flooding and you say, wow, I can't believe that gal drove that car, or that guy drove that car, or that cop drove that car into an area that's over the hood. What were they thinking? I guess they weren't thinking. So the way we live is because we can see these kinds of things happening. And when we built our house, my son and my wife and I marched all over the property to figure out which knoll we thought was the best to build our house on. Which one would have the best drainage? Which one would be the most suitable for not being flooded? And that's what we did. But if you buy a used house, you inherit mistakes from the previous owner or owners. So my suggestion to you is go find a piece of land in the middle of the countryside where there aren't a lot of neighbors, where there aren't a lot of cell towers or electrical substations or nuclear power plants or toxic exhaust from factories. And the water's not polluted, and the ground's not polluted, and the taxes are low, and the government help that you might get is few and far between, and electricity is affordable rates, and you consider building a house there. And you do lots of research, and you look at lots of house plans, and you figure out what makes a lot of sense, what's affordable, and you find an area where they don't have building codes. And that way the government types aren't going to be breathing down your neck, telling you what to do. Those are just a few of my thoughts. I'd love to hear what you have to say when we come back, Rick.
Okay.
Doc Ram's with us. DocRam.com. DocRam.com. Dr. Richard Allen Miller. So during the commercial break, I saw that we had some calves just a few feet from the studio window. Those little couple 100-pound calves that we've been bottle feeding. And I ran over to the Jeep, got out a handful of range cubes, and these are like dog biscuits for cows, and I grabbed a handful of them, and I called Bessie and Joe. Hey, Bessie, hey, Joe, come on over. Biscuits. And they came running over, and I fed them these range cubes, which are like extruded.
It's about time we have something cheerful, you know?
Yeah. And that was the point. The point is, so we can live like this. We actually can live in the countryside, and that's what I was kind of talking about. We can live in the countryside, and we can do those kinds of very pleasant things.
Minor
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can enjoy life. And so I guess my question is, Rick, I talked about building your own in the countryside. Do it your way. Make your own mistakes rather than buy someone else's mistakes. Rather than buy the mistakes of building contractors who cut corners, electrical contractors who cut corners, put the outlets in the wrong places, the lights in the wrong places, the house in the wrong place, the drainage system inadequate, the septic system in the wrong place. Why do that? Why not find a property in the countryside that has not been built on and build your own? Make your own mistakes.
That's a dream. That's the American dream. And the American dream is just that. You're asleep, because I'm a renter. I thought I was going to be able to buy my home. I love my home. My girlfriend would move in a heartbeat if I was able to buy this home. But now, instead, I have to move. And I don't have the money to move. I don't have, The American dream is you have to be asleep now. And I don't mean to be such a doom and gloomer. I don't. But I would be remiss if I didn't say something as a scientist. And this 5G smart meter combo is an end game weapon. And once it's deployed, there is nothing. There's no defense. You can't shield it. You can't get away from it. It is going to require, like you said last week, more towers in order to have the bandwidth reach, because it's an in-sight thing with 5 gigahertz, microwave. It's going to fry everything. And it's the LD50 ratios of this thing are so bad as to be, how could they possibly think? And yet, it's a done deal. You have no real say. Even if you opt out, they're going to charge you to not have it. How does that work? It's not about a guy coming out to your property and reading your meter for $30 a read. That's crazy. That means they're raising the electric prices, power prices, by at least, $30. That's what they're talking about per month, just for a reader. Mm-hmm. Is that really what it costs? Really? I don't believe it. Yeah. I don't believe any of it. And we have these talks going on here, and even our power company, our local one, didn't really want to push it, but they must. Why? I'm telling you, there's something else going on. I really don't have a clue I don't know what to say to people. But there's no place you can get away from it. Pennsylvania.
Well, here's one way. Yeah, here's one way of looking at it.
University of Pennsylvania is now saying that you can't go into certain forests because you don't have telephone coverage. What? That's why I go into the woods, to get away from that.
That was one of the things
I was going to mention. The university's doing this. I can't believe it.
Professor,
I would be embarrassed to call myself a scientist in people supporting this kind of technology. And I'm challenging anybody out there on it. This is crazy. And the more I look at it, the more I study it, the worse it looks.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about...
I got to step back. I got to step back.
I have to do that often. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do to shield yourself a little bit. DocRand.com. So the current 4G cell towers have about a dozen antenna ports and to support the communications. Now the new 5G cell towers will have about 100 ports. So we're going to go from 12 ports to 100 ports. And the 4G cell towers are about 90 feet tall, 90. About the height of a 9-story building. 90 feet tall. And they're expensive to install. And they're expensive to maintain. If you want to change the light bulbs on it, it costs about $1 a foot, or it used to about 13 years ago, to hire a guy to go and change the light bulbs on these towers. And it's dangerous. And those towers sway, and not everybody is going to do that. Well, the new 5G towers are about 4 feet tall, shorter than a person, as opposed to 90 feet tall. Now, the problem is that the signals are going to be transmitted every couple hundred feet, and maybe every block in the city, or multiple antennas per block. And you won't be able to tell what they are because they're only 4 feet tall. It's not like they stand out. Now, when we built our house, Rick and class, we chose a location that had a lot of woods. About half of our farm is woods. And I figured that, these cell towers are everywhere, and at least the trees and the leaves and the moisture in the growth of the trees and the leaves would attenuate some of these signals, these microwave signals. And there's only one tower near here, and it's a couple miles away. And we specifically chose a location where they wouldn't be putting in more cell towers because there aren't a lot of people here. Now, that's one of the reasons to get out of Dodge, to get out of the city, because in the city they want to put more and more and more of these 5G mini towers. And there are a lot of concerns. There are people who are concerned about breaking DNA. There are people who are concerned about destruction of cell metabolism, sleep disorders, cancer. The list goes on and on and on. So the World Health Organization, as far as I know, has classified radio frequency radiation as a possible carcinogen. So if that's the case, why are we doing this? Who is to blame? And, once it's up, it's really hard to get rid of it. Like, let's say we wanted to get rid of cell phone antennas right now. How would you do that? They're everywhere, and they're going to put more in. And what happens is they just show up. They just show up. And the 5G towers are so small that you really don't see them. They kind of blend in. They can be stuck on the sides of buildings, lamp posts, street lights, traffic lights, crosswalk, little poles where you push the button across the street. They could be everywhere. Signposts, billboards, everywhere. And you won't know where they are without meters. Rich, your thought?
Well, I remember a comedy called Neighbors with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. And what happens when you're near a high-tension power line. And then I remembered when these towers started being put up on the top of mountains, doing a direct line of sight from one mountain to the next to move the microwave band. And I remember that they disguised them as trees so they wouldn't stick out on top of a mountain with trees. And now you can spot them. You can spot them everywhere. And actually, there's one right here in the center of Grants Pass, Oregon, right down at the racetrack. It's we have horse racing, limited horse racing in June, and they've got one right there, right now, that went up a few months ago. Nobody noticed it, and then all of a sudden there it was. And that's how it's going to play. And there is no defense. And really, that's why we're on the earth, is to shield ourselves with our atmosphere. Our atmosphere is supposed to shield us from this kind of nonsense of high-end radiation. It's one of the reasons why we can't travel in space, because of the deadly radiation from these high gigahertz level bandwidths. And we now instead are putting it on the other side of our shield. Down on
the inside of our armor.
That's where the part that people don't get, and it's done so quietly that before anybody notices, it's already done. And that, to me, smacks as an invasion of something. And I have no idea, but if I were an alien and wanted Earth, this is how you do it.
Yeah, it's an outrage. And here's another thing. The effect on the skin. So one of the biggest concerns about 5G is how these wavelengths affect the skin. So the human body has between 2 and 4 million sweat ducts. And as we sweat, we become more conductive to these frequencies. So, unbelievable. And well, here's the proof. Here's the proof. So if you put in your microwave oven class a cup of water, which has a lot of conductivity for microwaves, you can boil the water. You know that. You can put a cup of water in there and then boil it and put your tea bag in later, or you can take a cup of cold coffee and put it in there and heat it up so it's really warm. You can take a hot dog, which has a lot of moisture or water in it, and you can heat it up in a minute. Okay. Or you can take a piece of toast, dry toast, and put dry toast in the microwave oven. And how well does that heat up? Not so well. Why? Because it doesn't have the moisture to absorb the microwave radiation. And how does that microwave radiation work? Well, you know when you're cold in the wintertime and you rub your hands together to warm them up, the friction? That's what the microwaves do. They go between the molecules of whatever it is that they hit, and they cause those molecules to vibrate against each other, and the friction causes them to heat up.
This is going to be used eventually as a so-called type of communication, synthetic telepathy. And I'm going to tell you that every single shooting, high school shooting in America, has the kid that said that he heard voices in his head. This is a new weapon that was developed almost 40 years ago that is now becoming an end-game weapon. And that one woman running for Congress or whatever that's saying that it's about pornography, did you read about that? That's the most absurd, stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I would be remiss if I didn't start criticizing the way people are responding to what's going on all around us. The prisons are no longer about opiates. All the inmates are on antidepressants and antipsychotics now. That's another beta testing that they've done. It's like the kids in high school that are doing these shootings, it's a beta test on how to set it up in a neighborhood near you. And if you don't think they're not going to use that as a weapon, what planet did you grow up on?
Rick, we've got Dawn's to you. Dawn's, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm joining you in a little bit of the melancholy, but I think I might find something I can say to make us all feel a little better by saying it on the air. So, basically, I've had kind of a rough go of it myself, and I don't want to seem trite on a fix or anything, but the loss of confidence is the thing that I'm experiencing.
There you go. There you go. Trust. That's the word, trust. We don't trust anything anymore.
And we have to put on these hats. We have to be the doctor. We have to be the lawyer. We have to be the farmer. We have to be the hairdresser. We have to be the
law enforcement, whatever. Yes.
We have to be the whole conglomerate of what it takes to live. And we have those of us that were raised to be responsible are going to feel something. If you have empathy, you're going to feel it, and you're going to experience the energies in advance of the actual events. And so I think, Doc Graham, you're one of the exceptional people, and I wanted to come on the air today and say it to anybody listening, and you have given so much of yourself, and I want to see you situated and people like you situated. And I'm not talking about me. I'm in the opposite position. I've got 3 homes, and I can't live in all 3 of them, and I don't know exactly which way to move because I'm not getting clear intent on which direction I should go. So I'm kind of in a holding pattern, and that can have its own difficulties if you're empathetic because you can feel what's going on with people around you. Yeah. So anyway, I went on a great big tour here recently since about May 16th. And in between that, it was 6 months to the day on Mother's Day that my mother passed. And then it was my birthday on May 20th. And then it was this, and then it was that. And there was just all kinds of opportunities for me to get completely down in the dumps. So I started looking around for some confidence. I started looking for confidence. I started looking for where I could trust. And I always tune in to you, Vince. I always tune in to you. So I wanted to tell you that, too. When I need to get a feeling that there's people out there that are trying to do right by themselves and others, I listen to you guys. So I called in today, a little upset, able to talk, barely able. And I just wanted to say to you, I found a little bit of a trite answer to this that helped me through this dark period. We had a mower man come out here with a big mower like you use on golf courses. And he was mad at his bosses. And he deposited something like around 500 pounds of rocks in lawns. And I was very upset by it. It did damage to cars. It put holes in siding, blah, blah, blah. And I went out and I raked, when I got done, 900 pounds out of my neighbor's yard.
Hold that thought. Dawn, hold that thought. We'll be right back. Class, if you'd like to call in, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to listen on the telephone listen line, 24/7, 605-477-3249. Dawn's is with us, and Dawn, you were talking about a guy who mows the lawn depositing rocks on lawns so that the rocks would go flying and break windows. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. Yeah, last season it was a window breaker. This season it was dents in the siding, holes in the siding, dents in the cars, chips in windshields. And so I started, I think it was around probably around the 10th of May. I started raking pebble-sized stones the size of your little fingernail out of the yards. And I just got done probably a couple of days ago. And I raked and raked and raked. And I've got to give credit where credit is due. I'm a mutt. I've got some pretty pure tracing back, but I'm a mutt. And people try to categorize me. And I listen to mutts, and I listen to everybody. I'm eclectic. I'm not stuck in any kind of a religious doctrine. I go by feel, mainly. Not always, mainly. And it just felt wrong to leave it that way. And so I went out and raked it. And I listened to Anthony Patch. I paid a lot of attention to him when he was going over a lot of scientific material a few months ago. And one of the things he kept repeating was 180 it. So that was my way of 180ing a terrible thing. I filled 9 potholes. I even went up to a business and on a street and filled a pesky pothole they had a long time. And it made me feel better, and it made me feel like there was something I could do, because here's the feeling I'm relating to what I'm hearing out of other people that are going through this, that know better, that we don't need to live this way. And the thing that I'm understanding and that I'm hearing out of other people is it's like we're in the middle of a soccer field and everybody's competing and playing soccer around us, and we're getting bumped into and knocked over and knocked down, and we can't see a clear route out of the chaos. And it's a matter of needing to 180 right there in the middle of the soccer field. That's where you need to feel better. And I don't believe in any system where you have to fold yourself up into a pretzel to get relief. It better work on my feet, because I'm in the field all the time. Whatever I'm talking about better have practical application. And I'm telling you that just finding something to turn something around like that. Now, I couldn't 180 all of it. I mean, there was damage done. But by getting myself in a better position, I was able to call you guys today. Or if I hadn't been able to turn that around, I don't know if I would have been able to talk without crying.
Dawn, there's something that I heard yesterday for the first time. And I wrote myself a note. It was Automobile Association did a commercial on road rage. And they're saying that, and they were explaining road rage, and people are happy, and all of a sudden, no, they lose it, they lose it. And, simple scenarios where people are talking, and then the mother loses her temper at her child. One second she's okay, next second the mother just loses it. And that's what's happening all around us, and it's happening so much that there's now a commercial saying, knock it off. You don't need to behave like this. You can be nice to other people all the time. I mean, I think that's the message. And I think what you're saying, if correct me if I'm wrong, Dawns, is that there was this guy who mowed lawns as an employee, and he was annoyed with his boss, so he was going to take it out and inflict damage that he would trace back to his boss by these guys mowing lawns and throwing these rocks and damaging siding, windows, cars, etc. And the interesting thing is, it happened to me, It took out the window on the back of my, my old Mercedes, 1996. One of these mowing guys hit a rock and it took out my back window. The guy denied it, and I called his boss and I said, hey, you guys did it, and we can do it the easy way or the hard way. Pick one. And I said, I don't care. It'd be fun going to court. I don't mind. And they decided they were going to do it the easy way and pay for the rear window. But the boss said he had to pay for it out of his own pocket because they've hit so many pieces of glass and done so much damage that one more claim would get him to the point where he would not any longer be insurable. That's
well,
the kind
I
of
want to
stuff
add
that's
to
going
that
on.
a little bit when you get a chance.
Hold that thought. We're going. Just cleaning the nose prints off my reading glasses that I used for the broadcast. During the commercial break, Mrs. Finelli and I went out and we fed Bessie and Joe their bottle for this morning. And how big are these bottles? They're half a gallon each. and we just call them, hey, Bessie, hey, Joe. And they come running for their bottles. It's the cutest thing. And they're a couple 100 pounds now. And so I just wanted to share that. Doc Graham's with us. Dawn's with us. And Dawn, you were talking about these rocks, and I mentioned that, my rear window was taken out on my old 1996 Mercedes diesel, the best car I've ever owned, and I was annoyed. I was annoyed because I thought this is carelessness, and I talked to the owner of the mowing company, and he didn't want to pay for it, and I kind of let him know.
Avoidable suffering. All of it's avoidable suffering.
Yeah, and I explained to him that we could do it the easy way or the hard way, and either way is fine with me. I was up for it, and he decided he was going to have the windshield, the rear windshield replaced at his expense, and so what you're talking about, I can see happening a lot in cities, and just distributing rocks on lawns can cause an enormous amount of damage because, well, for one thing, the people who use these zero-turn motors, they're in a daze, and they're riding around, and they're aiming the discharge chute at the road. Cars are going by, and they're just completely oblivious to the projectiles that they're sending out the chute. It's nuts.
Well, let me
nuts.
Let me add in something here as almost a disclaimer. Now, I'm speaking on impressions of this guy. And so my impression was he was angry, and there had been some communication scene and everything, but we actually stood there and watched him and tried to stop him. And
lots of luck.
Yeah, and was blowing them out of the potholes right at the lawns with the leaf blowers and the weed eater, and then got the big machine to move about 2.5 inches of rocks right up against the houses. So we had observed this, and I'd stepped out and tried to. I thought it was not a known thing he was doing because you got the earplugs in and the sunglasses on, and you're listening to music, and nobody's paying. You think that, but I got waved off. He knew something of what was going on with his energy, and I didn't. So I just wanted to say on a thing that they impression that I had was that he was very upset, and some communications that had taken place between others. That having been said, there was no way to calm him down, so the only thing to do was to let it, continue and then try to fix it the way I could. Now, that was more for my feelings that I did that than it was for a situation of me. I mean, when you put one of those big machines down on driveways and start mowing the rocks, and you're hearing the rocks getting cut out of the driveway hitting stuff, you know that there's a lot more going on than somebody just being remiss.
Yeah, well, so there are a lot of things, and if it were his machine, obviously it wasn't, because if it were his machine, he'd be saying, "Wow, these blades are probably $40, and I'm trashing the blades." No business owner would do that. Okay.
Well, it was
business owner would avoid damage.
It was his equipment, I'm pretty sure, but that's only my impression. That's how upset this individual was. I'm trying to give you a little different picture. So I want to go a different direction with it. I understand what's going on like that in all kinds of walks of life. People are encountering it. But the thing that I got out of this that I never had before is before I was standing in the soccer field with all this going around with me with no avenue, with nothing to be able to do. It was the Anthony Patch recommendation of the 180. By going out and breaking those rocks, I suddenly discovered accidentally, not because I'm bright, but I discovered accidentally that I felt better. And I could get on with my business because I didn't just leave it there, and every time I looked out there, saw the damage, it somehow converted it to leaving it in a better way than it would have been left. However, I do want to say that during this period of time that all this is going on another level, I find out that someone's entered in Ancestry.com that my father didn't have any children. So I've had that going on, so I've had to be my own attorney, too. And these are the types of things that are going on in all different walks, that people are going out and they're attacking each other and they're doing these things, and I understand that. So for those of us that are experiencing that, I'm saying find something that you can try to 180 it. Now, I didn't 180 the whole thing. I didn't fix the damage, but let me tell you what I did do. I went out and rinsed the water and the pebbles that I couldn't rake. I used water, and then I took a mini dragon, and I went out and I sealed the cracks in the driveway and filled the potholes and did it in such a way that they haven't been coming out and getting out, and we're just hoping that we got enough rocks out that if he does decide to put his blades down and do it again, there's not going to be the number or the amount or as great a damage. So all we were able to do is lessen the damage and lessen and take some of the thing out of it. And I want you to know that I could feel, especially at this business, this one pothole had been bothering people for years, and I felt that, and I could actually feel that people were saying, wow, that hole's been filled, because it's like within walking distance of my car when I drive over here. So,
Don, let's hear what Rick has to say about this.
Well,
Rick, what are your thoughts?
I know what's going on. Everybody is feeling the minor irritations across the board, and feeling a helplessness of not knowing what to do next.
Yeah, that's
I'm feeling that. I don't know what to do.
Well,
I feel
I'm
like
recommending
on the
180.
powers, on the things that I feel strongly about, doesn't matter.
Right.
I can't
That's
do
why
anything
I'm
about
saying
it. I feel
from the energy of a female, I don't care how much they try to homogenize men and women. There's a way to take the view from the male side and the view from the female side and combine them and some way see some kind of an action. So I'm advocating, just because it worked for me, that in view of all these hardships that I was in, and I was pretty sad, I was pretty melancholy, and that's not my nature. And so what I did is I found this by accident, that I felt better and was able to go on.
You know that Vincent was saying earlier about war and the disparity in male to female because of wars. And I remember reading about the Temple of Isis and the Eleusinian Mysteries, where it was a female-dominated society where there were no wars. It wasn't until the patriarchal concepts of male dominance came in that there began wars. And I just want people to realize that that's the distinction between a male and a female and the concepts of what war actually represents.
I think you're absolutely correct that there is that way, and it's either male or female. Well, I guess what I'm saying is there's also cultures where there was a good camaraderie.
Matriarchal, the ones that worshipped the mother as opposed to the father, and patriarchal systems. Look at Iran and Iraq and the differences in the way their religion treats human beings.
And I'm saying that from my Native American roots, I've been shown that there is a way for the women to make their voice and be incorporated with the men's voice, and a greater wisdom comes out of the combining of the two rather than one gender dominating the other either way. And
right.
So my calling in today was my way of trying to actually live it.
Yeah, and thank you, by the way, for your
I wanted to throw my 2 cents in, even though I didn't feel good. I'm not real concerned about how I sound on the radio today. I'm just doing what my heart told me to do.
That's the way to do it.
When I think about what you and Rick just said, I was thinking, have I ever heard a mother say, all right, let's just go beat him up? I've never heard that. I've never heard a mother say that. Now, dads on the other hand, yeah, sure, right? They say that.
Well, that's the distinction.
That's a great insight you're having there, Vince. And I also wanted to say something to you. I've kind of talked to your guests and not talked to the host. And I wanted to say you handle me calling in my first time to you just beautifully, and you have ever since. And I listen to how you handle people. I want you to know that there's something you guys are putting across that isn't in the words to the ones that can pick up on it. And there's something else I want to say. That observer effect is recording everything. There's an observer first that's a natural mechanism that everything that ever lived on this planet has had some kind of observation taking place, and all of that is recorded in some kind of an energy belt around this earth. I don't know how, I don't understand it, but I feel it's there, that every single incident has been recorded in this pure observer, and then it goes into observer effect. But here's a funny thing that I wrote out to somebody lately. Everybody was talking about the Princeton split light experiment. Well, how do we know for sure that those little particles weren't affecting us to see it switching from a particle to a wave? How do we know that the effect isn't both ways? There hasn't been much able to research that or to look into that experience or that experiment, but I've wondered that myself. How do we know that the particles of light aren't affecting us in our ability to observe them? It's not just us affecting them, affecting the light. What if it's toric? Well, that's just one of those things I hobby my mind with when I'm upset about things, and I'll think about things like that. So that's another way I 180 it. And then I'll just sit down and be a little quiet. I don't have to fold up in a pretzel or do anything, or I can be sitting in the car driving. And I'll just listen to my heart and see if there's anything I can do about anything to swing the energy up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Dawn, thanks so much for calling in and for being with us and for all those kind words that you said. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm listening.
Yeah, appreciate it. Rick Miller and I'll be right back. Well, these thugs who want to deploy 5G are doing the same thing. You said that it's like putting the microwaves, the radiation that is harmful, outside our protective shell, which is the atmosphere. We're putting it under our armor. And so the analogy that I was thinking of as you were saying that was the effect on the eyes. So in 1994, there was a study that found out that low-level millimeter microwave radiation produced opacity in rats' eyes. That's cataracts. So it's linked to cataracts, and we are, heck, no problem. We'll just have these microwaves everywhere. No escape. So if you're in the city and you're sitting at a bench waiting for the bus, or you're hailing a cab, or you're walking down the sidewalk, or you're in your office, or you're getting onto the subway, there's no escape. None. You can't get away from this. It will affect your eyes. It will give you cataracts. No problem. We'll have cataract surgery. Who wants to do that? This is what these thugs are doing to us. That's just the eyes. There's effects on the heart as well. Rick, your comments?
There's Dr. Beal in Florida has done extensive studies on LD50 ratios on the different wavelength band waves that will affect biological organs. And there's a whole list of them, and each organ is different. It responds to different frequency bands. When I did the aortic catheter, I found that the aorta would reflect 28 megahertz, whereas Doppler transducers were at 10 megahertz. We're talking about gigahertz, which is even more zeros in terms of invasiveness and verging on quantum mechanical, sub-quantum mechanical levels, that there's no shielding, nothing known that will reflect or make these radiations opaque and not be absorbed. It's possibly the single worst thing that we could be doing to ourselves.
Okay, that and radiation, right?
Yes, that's what it is. It's high-end. It's high-end gamma ray level radiation, the kind that you get exposed to in deep space with no protection. And now we're putting it on the surface of the Earth.
Okay, so for those who can't seem to understand what we're talking about, I'm not talking about our class, I'm talking about people outside the class. Just tell these politicians who want to deploy 5G, you want to see what it's like? Put a bag over your head. Put a bag over your head and just walk around. See how you like being blind. How about that? Rick, is that far-fetched?
I don't even want to. It's worse than that because it doesn't just ruin the eye. It ruins everything connected to the eye. The amount of invasiveness of it, there's no shielding. That's why we can't really go into space and why we're talking about avatars. And now we're talking about putting it on Earth to the point where biological organisms, and we're not talking about just human, we're talking about everything. It's living. Everything.
Okay, so since you said everything, we're talking about our food.
We're talking about everything, excuse me, except black goo, which seems to thrive.
Rick, do you think this radiation 4G is killing the trees and the plants?
Something is doing something there. Look at it. You tell me. It's not the drought. It's not black.
We'll be right. Dr. M's with us, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. If you'd like to peruse his website, richardallenmiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. You can also go to docram.com. That'll take you to his Facebook page. Rick, according to what I've been... Well, in class, if you'd like to buy his books, go to richardallenmiller.com, richardallenmiller.com. And, we are not one of those radio broadcasts that begs for money. We don't do that. But if you'd like to support our instructors, you can find out what they have to offer. One of them is Dr. Richard Allen Miller, Senior USA Preparedness Instructor. He's got some great books. I have many of them. And I suggest that you consider looking at the site to see if you'd like to buy one as well. Rick, effects on plant health. We're talking about 5G. It's not necessary. This is something that is beyond stupid. This is not something that we need. It is another way of tracking our every movement. In class, if you want to know what I'm talking about, let's say we have one of these 4-foot towers every 100 feet in a city. Okay, and you are connected with your cell phone, and the other team, wants to find you. No problem. They know where you are within 100 feet. Think about that. They know where you are within 100 feet. Just because you have your cell phone that you are paying for so that they can find you instantly. And if
Worse
you're running...
than that, though, is an AI is profiling you so it knows how to predict what you're going to do next because of that immediate one moment to the next knowing where you are.
Yeah.
It goes
and how
downhill
about this?
from there.
Yeah, so let's say you're walking through a city street and you happen to be just walking at a normal pace and you see something on the other side of the street and you stop for a second and you look at it, for 10 seconds and then you continue on. But To your right is this business, which is like a smut shop. And now, hey, you were spending time in front of the smut shop. Well, actually, you were looking on the other side of the road, but the system would say, well, no, he's interested. We know that this guy's interested in smut. So that's one thing. Another thing is the effects on plant health. So I'm reading this article, Electric Sense, and it says that one of the features of 5G, is that microwaves are particularly susceptible to being absorbed by plants and rain. So humans and animals alike consume plants as a food source. The effects of these microwaves on plants could leave us without food, or with food that's not safe to consume, or without safe food. Okay. Another thing is that as water falls from the sky, we'll call that rain, or fog, or mist, or moisture, the plants will also be irradiated. Now, when Rick said there's no escape, that proves there is no escape. Okay? The moisture that you're breathing right now, if you had 5G in your area, would be irradiated. And it causes necrosis of plants. That means death of the leaves and stems and limbs and trunks of trees.
That's why the trees are all dying in Oregon right now. All of them.
Okay, let's go to this. So we're concerned about depleting the ozone layer. I mean, the EPA's been all over it, and they've been saying, you know what? You guys that have air conditioning systems, refrigeration systems, you've got air conditioning in your home, central air conditioning. Well, you just can't dump that Freon into the atmosphere. You've got to capture it. You've got to recycle it. Okay, no problem. So we have a pump that captures it, a tank that we pump into, and we capture the Freon and condense it to a liquid or compress it to a liquid. No problem. Okay, but with these 5G satellites that we are going to be putting into orbit, the life expectancy is kind of short. So now we're going to have a fleet of hydrocarbon rocket engines that are going to blow holes.
Vincent, this is even worse. The Kilauea, the volcano that's currently active and pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the amount of carbon dioxide that volcano has released in the last week is more than all of the industrial waste in history. Now, you tell me why Kilauea is going off right now, and the single name keeps coming up in fracking. It happens to be Rothschild. And a simple connection of dots would state that he is trying to bring on the end of Earth in a sense of being last man standing, knowing that money is about to hit the brick wall and is going to take out the West Coast as a disaster thing before money collapses. It's a simple project of simply being last man standing by causing things like fracking to create the cold changes in our weather. And that is a simple physics. And now, nobody's mentioned this. And there it is.
Hey, here's a question. Is Rothschild a man or a woman? Because a woman wouldn't do that.
Well, historically, who knows what it is? Historically, who knows what it is?
Mm-hmm.
I have my own ideas. The bloodlines of Christ, the concepts of the Comte Saint-Germain, all of that, and these noble houses in Europe, I have my own ideas on what I think is going on.
One of the dangerous effects of 5G is the destruction of the immune system. Absolutely unbelievable. But, I guess we're willing to do it. We have to stop this, and I'm not sure how to stop it.
There's no way.
I'm really
it's already a done deal. That's the scary part. And by the way, even if you opt out, that does not mean your neighbor will, and you're still in the middle of the soup, and the potential of it being used as a weapon where they can direct an individual unstable on Prozac or, any kind of antipsychotic. They've beta tested it in prisons. They're now experimenting with our children. And watch what happens next.
I would really like to be able to have USA Prepares say, okay, AYHTDI. AYHTDI. And when I used to teach college classes, I would write that on the board on day one. AYHTDI stands for all you have to do is. All you have to do is. I wish we could say, all you have to do is the following to stop this. But I don't know what that is.
Not just saying no is not going to stop it.
I have to be very careful what I say. I mean, there's some things that we could do, but there'd be blood in the streets. There would be blood in the streets if people did what was necessary to stop this. And there have been some books written about, people have just had it. They've had it. And, well, let me tell you about something that I've learned that happened in Europe. So there were a bunch of farmers that were being pushed around by their county government, and they had it. They just had it. So the farmers aren't allowed to have guns as we do in the United States in this part of Europe, but they can have rifles. They can have a rifle. And so what the farmers did is they went over to the county government office, and they said, you guys are leaving. This is your last day, and I'm paraphrasing. You're all out of here. You're leaving. And there are 147 of us. And the county government said, I'll see 147 of you. We're not leaving. And the farmers said, well, yeah. That's because the rest of us are at your houses with your families. And you are leaving. And then the county government decided they were going to leave because they felt that they were threatened by these 147 farmers who, some of them went to the county government and the rest of them went to the farmers' houses and were visiting them, their wives and their children. And they realized this was a pretty serious situation. And the county government just vacated. And the people took over. I don't know what it's going to take. It might take that. I don't know. I'm not advocating it. I don't want to see it. But
there's a movie that just came out called Amerigeddon by Chuck Norris's son, Mike. It's available on the internet, and it's about how the Russians show up at a farmer's gate wanting his weapons, and what happens next. It's called Amerigeddon.
Okay, how do we watch Amerigeddon? How do we watch it, Rick?
It's on the internet somewhere. You can get it free. I did.
Okay. All right, so what we're talking about is who's the 5G? Who's playing roles in this? Well, according to this article in electricsense.com, it says private sector companies such as HTC, they manufacture mobile phones. Oracle, the database giant. Sprint, the cell phone company. T-Mobile, they're all playing a role in developing testing platforms, contributing time, knowledge, or money. Okay, that's in the 5G world. Qualcomm, QUALCOMM, has already demonstrated a 5G antenna with about 27 dB gain, 27 decibel gain. That's about 10 to 12 more dB than a typical cellular-based antenna. Now, my understanding is a 3 dB gain is twice the power. Is that right, Rick?
I think so.
Yeah. Every 3 dB is twice the power.
It's
so
the
6
higher
dB is
the 5G allows the voices being placed anywhere in space. You don't need air, you don't need vacuum, you just can place the sound anywhere in space. That's what 5G allows.
Since we're talking about really bad decisions, bad management, well, Sears is closing even more stores. They're going to close 72 more stores because they're deemed unprofitable. Unprofitable. Sears has not had an increase in sales in 26 quarters in a row. Sears has lost sales ground every day for 6.5 years. Sears was an institution. I'm angry about this because there are many of us who bought into good, better, best. That was what they sold. We bought into satisfaction guarantee to your money back. We bought into Kenmore appliances being really good appliances. If you bought a Kenmore, you could be certain that it had the best bang for the buck. You knew that. You knew that if you had a Craftsman tool, it was a hand tool, a ratchet, a screwdriver, a wrench, a socket. You knew that if it broke, no big deal. You just bring it back to Sears and say, "Oh, this broke. May I have another one, please?" And they go, "Sure." Sears is going down. I don't know if they're going to survive. I don't think so. I personally don't believe that Sears isn't going to be around much longer. Sears. One of the first real jobs I had in life was at Sears. I was hired as a mechanic as a teenager in high school, working after school. I would go with my blue jeans on. They gave me a Sears mechanic gray shirt, polyester and cotton, and I was there in one of those bays servicing cars. They knew I knew a little bit about cars, and they thought it was enough, and they gave me this job. I used to race cars on the weekend, and they hired me, and I loved it. Sears was a great company. I mean, satisfaction guaranteed your money back. If you bought something there and you thought, well, geez, it's not quite what I thought it was going to be, my expectations were higher than what I came home with, you could bring it back. And they would say, "I'm so sorry, is there anything else we can do to help you?" They'd give you your money back. They didn't beat you up and say, "Well, you know what? These are leather gloves. You shouldn't have put them in the washing machine. That was pretty stupid." No, they'd say, "Well, they really aren't meant to be wet, but if you're not happy with, how your ladies' dress gloves came out after you put them in the washing machine, and now they're 5 sizes too small," kind of like O.J. Simpson said, the glove didn't fit, right? After it was soaked with blood and got wet. Well, they'd give you a new pair of gloves, or they'd give you your money back. They're going down. They're going down because they've been mismanaged. And that's just a microcosm of what we're talking about in mismanagement of the planet. Who are we talking about? 5G. Verizon, AT&T, they started deployment in 2017 for testing. The first commercial deployment is going to start in 2020. And this is in all regions, including rural villages. Well, and they'll be saturated. All regions will be saturated with 5G. That means that no part of the country is going to remain safe from these ultra-high frequency signals. There's going to be satellite communication. We're going to have transmissions going up to the satellite. Then there's going to be like a floodlight covering the United States with 5G. But it won't be a light. It'll be microwaves. You will not be able to avoid 5G radiation. I guess that's where the tinfoil hats come in.
Tinfoil hats aren't going to work.
Well, I know.
That was a comedy where they had everybody's wearing tinfoil around their head. Good luck with that.
Well,
microwave band is so invasive that you could have a screw that had 28 threads to it, and it would walk its way through.
Rick,
that's
I went to Walmart.
Invasive. We're talking about quantum mechanical level, quantum mechanical level.
I went to Walmart and I said, "Y'all have any 22s?" And they looked at me like I was nuts. I wonder if the reason they don't have 22s is because AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile and useless cellular, I wonder if they're all afraid that people would take those 22s and start plinking at their towers. Because people don't know what else to do. I wonder. Rick, thanks so much.